Welcome to the Inverted Upside Down. You're listening to Paranormal Now with Alan B. Smith, rebroadcast on the UNX Network, Thursdays at 11 p.m. Pacific, Fridays at 2 a.m. Eastern.
However you are and whenever you are, welcome, good souls, to Paranormal Now. This is Alan B. Smith. Join us as we traverse the cosmic highway of paranormal portals and tantalizing turnoffs. And tonight, we have one of the best turnoffs that we can have. We're combining two things we like on Paranormal Now. One is Nick Redfern, our guest tonight, and the second is the mysteries of ancient Egypt and megaliths, and not just Egypt. This goes much more beyond that to megastructures all around the world and other archaeological finds that Nick had dug up in his research in his new book, How Anti-Gravity Built the Pyramids. So I'm really excited to chat with Nick tonight for 1 hour. So everybody knows, moving forward, Paranormal Now is now a 1 hour show. So we're doing live straight through 1 hour, no longer the 2 hour format. On the flip side of that, we are now doing a reboot of Coffee and UFOs. So Coffee and UFOs will now be a pre-recorded podcast, and we will really focus on ufology, UAP, the current news, but also boots on the ground ufologists and investigators who are out there doing the work and getting the evidence. So I'll try to get that reboot episode, the first one, up this Saturday night. And my guest is Jesse P. Keys, Pennsylvania MUFON field investigator. He and I are getting to know each other little by little, and we bumped into each other in Pine Bush in New York for the Pine Bush UFO Fair. And then I'll see Jesse this coming Tuesday the 13th. If you want to come and join us in person, we're doing a live screening of my documentary Half Light, which is all about experiencers and paranormal spiritual revelations, if you will. It's really fascinating. It's available on this channel, but we're going to do an in-person screening at the Tredyffrin Library in Wayne, right outside of Philadelphia. So if you're in the area, come stop by. It'll be nice to just do some UFO fellowship. And then after the screening, I'll do a brief presentation followed by Q&A. And we're going to bring in three of the interviewees from the documentary: Grace Hobbs, Geraldine Orozco, and Tiffany Mack. And they're all going to join in. And you can come in virtually on Zoom as well. And I'll put the link in the comment sections later. And I hope I will see you there. All right. So joining me now is the one and only Nick Redfern. He is the author of more than 60 books. He has been on many television shows, including Travel Channel's In Search of Monsters, History Channel's Unexplained, Ancient Aliens, and Monster Quest, Sci-Fi Channel's Proof Positive, and the National Geographic Channel's Paranatural. Nick is a regular guest on Coast to Coast AM. He lives in Arlington, Texas. Nick's blog, World of Whatever, at nickredfernfortean.blogspot.com. Nick, welcome back to Paranormal Now.
Hey, Alan, how's it going?
It's going great. Thanks for joining me. You are joining us by phone tonight.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, we're doing it the old style. For people wonder, we're actually I'm using my landline. We had the apartments where I live. It's a huge apartment block. And we had a huge bolt of lightning hit the one of the blocks that I'm in, and it's done something to the internet. I can't get any internet right now. So, but I guess sometimes maybe that's not a bad thing. So,
well, I mean, there's the worst things that can come from a lightning strike for sure. Thank you, New Jersey Paranormal Project. I appreciate that. I was just checking in with the listeners, Nick, just to see if the audio level is good, and we are good. And it's funny, when I first started doing podcasting. It was on the Inception Radio Network on Epic Voyagers as a guest host, and that's what we did. We had landlines. It was just all audio, and the landscape has changed so much. How do you feel about that, Nick? How do you feel about the proliferation of podcast, paranormal, and otherwise?
Oh, well, I mean, I think it's a good thing. I mean, sort of new data, new material, new technology. I mean, for me, it's a good thing. I guess there's sometimes there's kind of like an overdue of privacy. That can become a hassle now and again. But beyond that, I mean, I'm all good for technology, really. So.
Yeah, great. Well, speaking of technology, that's what we're talking about tonight. So you offer quite the hypothesis here, not totally unfamiliar to listeners, but for you, what was the first piece of evidence or clue that you discovered and you thought, aha, there might be something to the idea that sound or sound waves of some sort are being used, or what were used at some point in history to move these huge stones and megalithic structures?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is sort of a fascinating story. And over the years, I've read various books, and if you look into various books even from the 50s and 60s, you can see little snippets of stories and legends of how people in this area or that area had the ability to raise large stones. But in most of these earlier books, the stories were largely dismissed, and it was a case of reading that one sentence and then, well, what was all that about? And over the years, one of the days I should have said, I sat down and sort of got all the books out that I've got that mention this issue of sort of levitating stones in ancient times, and doing so, I was amazed when I found that I probably collected somewhere in the region of around about 20, 30 little stories, but they weren't sort of, really kind of formatted and in the right situation, etc., etc. And I thought, well, this would be the ideal time now. And this is when I was thinking about this, probably about 18 months ago. And I thought, well, why not try and put this story together, because there's so many of these gigantic stones, and there's very few answers as to how they were moved and put together. And so I thought, well, let's have a go, see if I can find a story which becomes coherent and you can put all the pieces together. And to my satisfaction, it did all come together. And the book itself, How Anti-Gravity Built the Pyramids, it's looked basically at how massive, huge blocks of rock and stone could have been created, and particularly even more incredible, how it could be moved for huge distances on the ground, and looking at things that seem to be impossible, but if you look back in the past, it is not actually impossible if we've got actually the answers to the question.
So, two things. There are discrepancies in, I would say, Egyptology. I hear on the one hand that we didn't have the human power, we didn't have enough technology to build these things. On the other hand, you have archaeologists that are saying, well, you're undermining the ability of humans and back then what they could accomplish. This technology, is it strictly human based that you're speaking of, or are you leaning anywhere in the direction of ancient aliens or the like?
Well, actually, that's a good point, because when you hear these stories, I've heard this before. People are saying, "Oh, well, you're not giving the people from ancient times, the things they need." That kind of angle. But the way I look at it is that the more I've looked into it, the more I've come to realize or conclude that there was some kind of ancient technology or an ability to raise massive and gigantic and heavy stones into the sky, and in some way the secrets about this have either been lost, or they've been deliberately placed secretly somewhere.
Yeah.
Now why that would be, that's a question all on its own. But for me, if you start to look into it and you place this next to this and that and so on, you do find that there is a sort of a coherent story that does suggest that all around the world, at various times, somebody or something had the ability to move these massive stones. Now, just to go back to your other point, are we talking about high-tech people who lived long before us, possibly even before the Sphinx, or are we talking about extraterrestrials? And what's intriguing is that in a lot of the earlier stories about this kind of situation, there are actually not many talks at all about sort of strange creatures, raising these stones into the sky. It sounds like, they're talking about people doing it. And so that makes me wonder if perhaps in the very distant past, there really were ancient civilizations that were once with us. They had a worldwide net, if you like, possibly, and they potentially had the ability to do this, the things that we just cannot do. Now, I'll give you a sort of a little angle of what this is actually about.
Okay.
And it's called acoustic levitation. And two friends of mine, Larry Flaxman and Marie Jones, have done very good writers, and they've looked into this to some degree. And I'll just give you a short quote from Larry and from Marie. And as they say, quote, "Two opposing sound frequencies with interfering sound waves, thus creating a resonant zone that allows the levitation to occur." So the best way to explain that, if you've ever got two magnets and you push them against each other,
sure,
and you know the space is there, but you can't push against it. Now, if you think of that kind of scenario, and you could raise a small stone between those two areas, in theory, you could raise that small stone. Now, in today's world, acoustic levitation has had its successful situations where scientists have been able to use these sort of opposing levitators to allow them to rise things up. Now, in our world right now, at least, we're talking about raising things like the size of like a nickel, which isn't really going to get us. It's not going to get us very far, in the industrial world or whatever.
Right.
But,
right.
but if you think about that as just being, say, the start of it all, and then we could go to the next step and allowing for something else a bit bigger and something else a bit bigger,
Sure.
and allowing to get something higher in the sky. And I don't say I've got 100% the answer, but what I do think, the more and more you look into it, you can make a sort of a good, solid scenario that could be the answer for it.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
as I said, now go on.
well, anyone who's had, blasted their speakers as loud as they could when they were teenagers, knows that, you get some vibration. And, if something's light enough nearby, it'll move. It'll move.
Yeah,
You're just
right.
moving those molecules. Now, I know that's different than, what you're talking about, like two opposing frequencies, but I don't think it's that hard to imagine. But the hard part, like you said, is the scale, because vibrating something of a homogeneous material like a nickel. Well, I don't know how much homogeneous nickels are these days. Anyway, but something like that is one thing, but a stone that is like kind of a composite of different minerals. That's when it gets really tricky to understand scientifically, I think.
Yeah, and I think anyone like me who loves music and gets sort of on and off tinnitus, that will kind of give you an idea. I mean, this is different, but it demonstrates how sound can actually, alter things, whether it's affecting the mind, the brain or whatever. Audio, sound, it can be used for all sorts of different things, whether directly or indirectly. So this may be just sort of another aspect of the usage of sound.
Yeah. What kind of music do you listen to? Are you a rock listener, or
Oh no, I love punk music.
Oh, that's why
Yeah.
that's why you have tinnitus.
Yeah. Well, it is. You're right. Well, I used to. Well, I still go to bands all the time, and that's one of the reasons. And my favorite band's the Ramones, and I'm always blasting it, and that's to my badness, I guess, if that's such a real word. But
yeah. I was into punk for a little while when I was younger, but I wasn't listening to the Ramones. I was listening to like the '90s punk, like No Effects, that sort of thing. But like you go to those concerts, oh my god! Like by the time you leave, it's just like this boom, boom, boom for hours. So if you look back in time, where do you see the most evidence for this? Is it the Egyptian pyramids, or are we looking at?
Well, that's a good question, because if you look around the world, there are sort of multiple examples, but the one that I would say stands out for the most would be the stones at Baalbek. Baalbek is in the Bekaa Valley in the Middle East, and we have to focus specifically on Baalbek and specifically in the Bekaa Valley. Now, we know from these gigantic rectangle, gigantic stones that can be found in the Bekaa Valley, and studies have shown that the stones are somewhere in the region of about 9,000 BC. So we're talking about 11,000 years ago they were constructed. Now, one of the most important things to note is if you look at photographs of the massive stones at Baalbek, the Bekaa Valley, you'll see these gigantic stones. And on some of the pictures, black and white ones, some old ones, you can actually see people sitting on them, and they look like an ant sitting on like a shoebox or something. Now, what's particularly intriguing is that there are 4 particular stones which are incredibly heavy. And one of them, which was actually found in 2014, that one weighs in at an incredible 1,650 tons.
Oh my, tons.
Yeah, and I'm not
Tons.
exaggerating.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you can get a picture up for yourself, to have a look at while we're chatting, but it's Baalbek, Baalbek stone, and you look at them, and like I said, you'll see these gigantic stones, and with little people, well, they look like little people sitting on them, and there's 4 of them that none of them are less than 4,000 tons. There's 1 or 2 roughly round about 1,000 tons. And then, as I said, the most famous one, or the most incredible one, is the one that's 1,650 tons. Now, of course, the big question is, this is important, where you see it, it's just laying there doing nothing.
Right, right. Just so you know, Nick, I have it on screens for everybody to see it right now.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Oh, that's good. Cool. Well, if you look at those stones, you can see they clearly, where you see them, they're not doing anything. So that obviously means to me that at some point they were going to be moved somewhere. Now, of course, the big question would be, how on earth, in 11,000 years ago, how would you move a stone that weighs 1,650 tons across sand? Never mind roads, or motorways, highways.
Well, I guess this is a question that I think has 2 sides of the same coin. So, on the one hand, the mystery, if I'm correct, Nick, is that we don't have the written evidence or archaeological artifacts to support a methodology. Is that true?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think the one thing, based on what you just said right now, I mean, what I would say is that when it comes to the answers, the Baalbek situation, for me, is the one that we really don't have any answers, I mean, you can make a sort of a case of, with some of the smaller stones, like in Egypt, for example, or some of the Central America stones, that kind of thing. But looking at those in Baalbek, it's kind of like, well, what the hell can we do? And where can we get answers? And
right.
And I would have to say, when you ask me a question about Baalbek, it's almost like, well, we don't even have a single answer.
That's my question, right? Is there no clue?
No, there isn't. There's just nothing. No, it's kind of like just. I wouldn't know what to say, but all I can say for sure that in the distant past, somebody or a team or a civilization had the ability to move gigantic stones in excess of 1,000 tons on sand, and to do it, in essence, effortless.
Well, so then the argument from the extraterrestrial side would be, well, there's no evidence because the humans didn't do it, right?
Oh, yes. I mean, that's an important thing, because I've actually got, towards the end of the book, I've got 2 chapters where I sort of gauge, what do people think, what do I think about, could it have been done by extraterrestrials, or could it have been done by even earlier humans that were around even before the Sphinx? We're looking at the Sphinx now. There's all this debate about, when the Sphinx could have been created. But, when we start talking about 11 or 12,000 BC, and people were able to do that back then. I'm quite open to the humanoid side, and actually, I do. If somebody said to me right now, if I've got the right answer, how these stones were elevated, and somebody said to me right now, do I think it was done by extraterrestrials or by humans? I would say it was done by humans, but it's still fascinating, because if humans could do that more than 10,000 years ago, there must have been like a human race or a human society that could do this, which we can't do now, and that makes it even more mysterious.
I'm glad I have my alien coffee bean coffee with me tonight, because it's a lot to wrap your head around, and that's what, I guess that's why you're writing about it, right? Because we don't have the answer. Do you think there's an avenue, Nick, that you can go down that might, or that you could maybe point to an archaeologist and say, go down this route, this might get you there to the answers?
Well, yeah, I mean, you see certain shows on TV, about aliens doing this and whatever, and it's not impossible. However, my view is that I think it probably was some sort of extremely powerful, advanced human civilization, and I kind of go with that. But, I mean, another example to give you, like Stonehenge. Now, everybody's seen pretty much Stonehenge, to tell just what it looks like. And it's in the English county of Wiltshire, which, interestingly enough, is where most of the crop circles are seen every year. And now Stonehenge, it's big, it's large, but it's not massively gigantic. It's some of the stones sort of roundabouts, sort of 30 feet high, 35 feet high. But if you look at these stones, you've got the stones standing up, and then somehow sort of 35, 40 feet in the air, you've got other stones lying horizontal. So how did they get those on top? Now, that would be a little bit easier, and maybe that could be feasible. But there's one aspect of Stonehenge that a lot of people don't really know. Although the stones that were used to construct Stonehenge, a lot of them weren't actually constructed by stones that came from the area. Most of the stones actually came from Wales, on what are called the Preseli Mountains. And the distance from where Stonehenge is in England to the Preseli Mountains in Wales is 240 miles. And I mean, you imagine, say even just one of those large stone, if you pick out the most heaviest Stonehenge, biggest stone, and you had to drag that with, say, 25 of your friends pulling on ropes through the Preseli Mountains, not on roads, not on smooth ground, but going through mountains for 240 miles. And then you've still got to drag them to Wiltshire to put the first stone up. And then you've got all the next, another trip to 240 miles, drag that other 240 back over the mountains again. I mean, you think about that. That again, that's just almost impossible, to think about it.
It blows the mind. So, but here's the thing: is it possible that so many disparate or seemingly disparate civilizations had access or knowledge of this technology? If it was so proliferated, why have we lost all knowledge? Why isn't there a papyrus somewhere or something that details exactly how this was done?
Well, you mean in sort of, with a brute force kind of thing like that.
Oh no, I just
No.
whatever this alternative anti-gravity technology is, if it's not like we're talking about one civilization, we're talking about multiple civilizations. So
Mhm.
how did it get lost?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, my view is that we're not dealing with one civilization. I think that, if we potentially, I think there could have been a civilization that was not just dotted here, there, like in Wiltshire, England, and this plan Baalbek
Mm-hmm.
here, there, and ABC there, and so on. What I think, there may actually have been sort of a worldwide civilization. Now, if there was, then that would have to have been in existence long before we were around. Because if it really was a worldwide civilization,
Mm-hmm.
we clearly should have known about. We should have known about it. So I can only think that it had to be so far back in time that that's why we don't know about it. It's, I mean, I don't think we're even talking about 5 or 10,000 years ago. I'm potentially thinking like 20,000
Wow.
years ago, because that's the only way I think the secrets would be completely lost, because the distance in time, it was just so far back.
Yeah. Now, in lieu of the extraterrestrial hypothesis,
Mhm.
that Genghis Khan in chat suggests, hey, maybe is it possible there was some type of cryptid animal that they used to power that died off?
Oh yeah, you mean like dinosaurs? You mean, or something?
Or maybe something like
Uh,
a mammoth, or
uh,
who knows?
well, that's actually really cool. I actually haven't heard about that or thought about that, but I mean, actually, that would be really cool. To see like 20 mammoths pulling stones across
Right.
it.
Yeah.
I mean that would be really cool. I mean, the one thing that I would go against it is the fact that you've got the one issue is the stones, which are extremely high in the sky. I mean, if you look at the you know the prime pyramids at Egypt,
True.
um,
Hmm.
if you think about those, they the lightest are sort of just round about a ton,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
if you imagine, or even with all the people and the manpower and animals, imagine having to haul in Egypt all of those massive stones, which, as I said, most of them start out like, at a ton. And if you look at the height of the main pyramids from the ground to the top, again, how you going to get those up, to the very top, to the point,
That's
and
true.
so again, I think what we're seeing are sort of less answers and more intrigue, and trying to place it all in sort of a simple, or it's sort of a down to earth situation. I think, from my perspective, it's just not working. None of the answers really work, for me at least, unless there's some degree of levitation, or some kind of anti-gravity,
Hmm.
or kind of something that would allow for the stones themselves to be made light. And there's been rumors like that in some of the old stories as well, that the ancients had found a way to make the stones light,
Hmm.
rather than actually using some kind of actual technology.
I mean, that seems like the best solution, if we could only figure out how exactly they did it using presumably prehistoric rudimentary tools. I mean, we're talking like before the Bronze Age, right? So, yeah. So it's a very different kind of technology. Andy Moreau in YouTube chat says several years ago they found another circle of stones at Stonehenge, but it was laid flat under soil. How does that relate to this at all?
Well, yes, yeah, and I mean, I think we've got to look at, sort of, I wouldn't say a multiple of ways to do this, but what I think, what we've got, we found something, we found snippets of something,
Mm-hmm.
and we're sort of, it's kind of like, the issue of, the trees and the forest, which one are you going to see, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And I think there's a potential that the answer could be like a simple answer, and the simple answer is one that we just haven't reached when we should have done, and I think it could be something, along that kind of line.
Well,
Sorry, go on. Yeah.
Well, do you think, Nick, that if let's just say, mammoths or some other mega mammal of some sort, were to have done the workload of dragging these things, do you think that there would be evidence of that dragging, of the weight of these stones being pulled, even if I know it's seemingly impossible through the mountains and what have you, but do you think there would be evidence then of tracks and dragging and?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, go back to, like, with the mammoth kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that would be a great scenario, and I'm still thinking about it now, actually.
Good job, Genghis.
But now, I mean, I'm sure in ancient times, just regular, normal ancient times, that there was ways and means, to construct this and construct that,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't have any problems with that, but the idea of sort of hauling massive stones, more than a ton, up the Preseli Mountains, it's kind of like sort of hauling multi-ton stones up your average mountain in the United States.
Yeah.
And I don't think, even with multiple mammoths, even that, we could haul them, up the like Mount Helens or something like that.
Do you think that the standing stones of Avebury fall into this category? That they're big enough and heavy enough that you would only be able to use some sort of anti-gravity to move them?
Well, I think for the really big ones, like Baalbek, things like that,
Mm-hmm.
and with Stonehenge, I think it's not only is it not, I think it's not feasible because of the weight, but it's also the fact you've got to go over mountains, which it's kind of like, well, how on earth are you going to do that in the first place? How are you going to actually get your stones to get hauled along mountains? For, like I said, for in excess of more than 240 miles, and then they've got to go back and again, and that's just potentially. I mean, perhaps if they just sort of start, on one stone, and it would take months, just to sort of take a stone for 240 miles, the size of a dead car, and try carrying that, up a mountainside for 240 miles, and then bring it back to help build, the next one of the henges.
Well, do you think that it is possible? Do you entertain the idea that any kind of vocalization or percussion or chanting of some sort could somehow have this effect on these stones?
Well, Well, that's a good point, actually, because if you look into the history of various places, again, like Stonehenge, some of them have sort of little holes in them, and also in Wiltshire, there's other smaller stone circles, and altogether there's actually a massive amount of stone circles in the UK, and some of them have these curious holes in them, and it's been suspected that these holes were put there to allow for sound to come through, and that ancient man may have used sort of ancient sound as part of their rituals. And so we might actually be talking about an ancient human civilization which actually sort of almost lived in a world which was dominated by sound. I mean, that would imagine that, very different to our civilization. But imagine a civilization that, like I said, with their rituals, when they pray, and there's also intriguing data that suggests that ancient man knew how to sort of help the ability to sort of take away sort of pain, something along the lines, for rheumatism, arthritis, that ancient man may have been able to use something along that line to actually to sort of make somebody clean again and healthy. But it's all being done by sound.
Well, you know what, Nick, that's a good point, because like the Savannah syndrome and other technologies using microwaves or sound waves, you can make someone sick. So if you can make someone sick, maybe you're right. Maybe you can do the reverse.
That's right.
Right. Can you tell us a little bit because in your book you cover a lot, and you include categories that one might not, and that's what makes it you a good researcher, is that you connect the dots to other things. Can you tell us a little bit about Bruce Cathy?
Yeah. Well, Bruce Cathy was sadly, I mean, he's dead now, but Bruce Cathy was someone who also got into this whole issue of anti-gravity, levitation, and so forth. And he was someone who didn't feel that just, you could build something at Baalbek, or you could build something at Easter Island or something like that, which is another example. But Cathy, who was a very good pilot, a New Zealand pilot, and he came to believe that all around the world at one point there was what he called an ancient grid. And he felt that we had lost this grid. And if you look at it, the grid that he talks about could actually be what we're starting now to call acoustic levitation. And Cathy spent many, many years of sort of refining this theory, the idea that that the whole world could have been a grid, and it would be kind of like the sort of the parallel of jumping on sort of the like the New York subway or the London Underground trains. Kind of. I mean, that's like a simple, way of talking about it. But imagine something like the New York subway, and you could jump on and jump off, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you make that in your mind as sort of something that is a grid or a levitator, and you put all this together, and you knew the secrets of traveling the world. It really make it very easy. And I recommend anybody really to read Bruce Cathy's books. They're really good books, and but not just that. I mean, he was writing about things like that going back to the 1960s, but he'd already started doing the research in the early 1950s.
Yeah, and if you want to find out about Nick's books, go to nickredfern40n.blogspot.com. I put it in the comment section. It's in the show description as well. Nick, when you're researching this, what was the most out of the box discovery for you relating to this technology?
Well, I'll tell you the one that I guess it's the one that's sort of the more alternative, but it's also for me one of the best stories. Is excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Is hello? Can you hear me?
Yep. Go ahead.
Oh, we just had a funny hello. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Yep. Nick, you there? Hello.
Hello.
Nick, can you hear me?
Hello.
We seem to have lost Nick. I can hear Nick. He can't hear me. I don't know if you guys can hear Nick.
Oh, I've got you. You're back.
You're back?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No.
Yeah. I don't know what happened then. Maybe the Men in Black.
Probably you wrote about them, so you know.
Yeah.
they're watching you.
Yeah, but this story revolves around a guy named Ed Leeds Skalnin, and Ed was a citizen of Latvia, and he travelled all around the world, and there's a part of his story is based around what we're talking about now, but another part about the story was about his girlfriend, and you know, they were going to get married and etc. and live a wonderful life, and it all fell apart. And it's sort of like it's a cross between a mystery and you know, and a sad life, you know, and a romance that never worked. And one of the people who was really fascinated by that story of Ed's was Billy Idol, and yeah, and he wrote a book called Sweet 16, and the book, the song Sweet 16 that Billy Idol wrote is about Ed's life and how everything sort of collapsed, and
that's interesting.
And he's also Billy Idol was fascinated by the fact that that Ed himself created this fascinating place in in Florida, and where that Ed created what, if you like, sort of like a sort of a small kind of Stonehenge with a small Baalbek, and placing them all together and inviting people to come and see it, and it's a fascinating story, and how he was able to put together all of these gigantic stones in Florida at this place that he built called Coral Castle. And anybody can go to Coral Castle now, and people go there all the time.
Yeah.
And some of Ed's creations, which he put together, very often he would do it overnight, and then people would come the next day, and there would be like a 9-foot rock there, you know, sort of weighing like 9 tons, standing upward, and you know, somebody will come and see it and said, "Well, Ed, where did he come from? You know, it wasn't there last night." You know. Now, there's something particularly intriguing about this. I'll tell you something. Something that Ed himself actually said about all this. This is one of Ed's quotes. He said, "I have discovered the secrets of the pyramids and have found out how the Egyptians and the ancient builders in Peru, Yucatan, and Asia with only primitive tools, raised and set in place blocks of stone weighing many tons. So he's basically telling us he found a way to move at least the pyramid stones.
Yeah.
And now, if that is the case, he was very, very cautious on what he said. That quote I just mentioned that Ed gave, that was very, very careful the way he said it. But if he did find the answer, and he'd found the answer to what had happened, say, 12,000 years ago, we could potentially change our world, really. So.
Yeah, but then if you could change the world, why didn't he give us a recipe? What?
Well, I guess one of the issues might be, the extent to which our civilization could be changed. And I mean, sometimes, where there's the issue of like culture shock, could our civilization, if it was changed so radically, and science and technology was changed so radically, would we want to do it in that way? Maybe people are. I mean, we know that there are multiple people now looking into acoustic levitation. So possibly somebody is slowly, starting to begin the roll down the hill to the next part of civilization. In the same way that kind of like the same thing happened with the internet.
Yeah, Nick, do you have any upcoming events that we should know about?
Yes, I've actually got one. Yeah, I do quite a lot of conferences and events, and not this coming weekend, but the weekend after. I'll be speaking at the Mothman Festival in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and that's really good fun. It's like about 9,000 people turn up, and this is the first time since since COVID began. It was shut down, and they finally decided to put it back on again now.
That's great.
And so I'm looking forward to going to that one. And they have they have people. There's like Miss Mothman, and there's bands playing, and they've got Mothman beer and things like that. Yeah. And people. There's people sort of selling, posters and things like that, and it's kind of like it's like a town fair, but on the size of like your average large town kind of situation. And so I'll be speaking there, and I'll be speaking at the Mothman Festival about UK parallels to the Mothman. So I'll be talking about like these humanoid winged creatures with these sort of fiery red eyes. So I'll be talking about the English or the UK side of Mothman.
Of all that, yeah. All right, and tonight we've been talking about this book, How Anti-Gravity Built the Pyramids. You can get that at nickfernfordian.blogspot.com. Nick, thanks so much. I appreciate having you on.
Thanks, man. Had a good time. Thank you.
All right. Well, have a good night, brother. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in tonight. This is the first 1 hour special of Paranormal Now, no longer a 2-hour show. If you are in the Philadelphia area, this coming Tuesday the 13th at the Tredyffrin Library in Wayne, Pennsylvania, we'll be doing a live screening of the Half-Light documentary. So if you can join us, that'd be awesome. It's a free event. It's run by Jennifer Stein. Many of you know her. It's director of Travis, of the Travis Walton story. And she is headlining what's called MUFON Mainline. So we'll also be zooming in some guests, interviewees from that documentary for the Q&A. So that'll be really fun. And I hope to see you all there. And as always, until next time, everyone, peace and love, and live in the mystery.